So you're about to heal your first dungeon. But how do I do this whole healing business? In this video, I will give you the basics of healing so you can enter the dungeon with some confidence. Make note this is a role-specific guide, so while we will talk a little bit about the individual healing jobs, this is not a guide focused on a specific one. Instead, we're going to focus on the overall things the healer needs to know and do. This guide is focused on healing in a dungeon, as it is a nice place to start before entering a larger scale content. In a dungeon, you are paired with 2 DPS and a tank. The tank is there to get beat up by the boss, so it doesn't hit anyone else. The DPS will try to kill the enemy as fast as they can, and your job is to keep these idiots alive while also killing the enemy. I highly recommend telling the group that you are new to healing at the start of the dungeon, as the tank is the one who controls the pace of the dungeon with picking how many enemies you deal with at a time. If the tank believes you are an experienced healer, he might pull more than you can handle. Just communicate, but don't be afraid to try handling bigger pulls. One of the best ways to learn is by failing. We are lucky to have a good community here that should support you as long as you're open about your skill level. The different types of healers. Just like the DPS and tank, there are some difference between the healing jobs. You got the option of 4 jobs, and they are all good and capable of taking part in any content in the game. But their healing styles do differ, allowing a variety, offering a good range for all types of players. The first healing job you can take is the White Mage, as they start off as a conjurer, which is a healer at level 1. There is a common consensus within the community that this job is excellent for beginners. The reason is that this is a reactionary healer. In this job, you get a lot of free and insta-cast heals, allowing you to react to pretty much every situation. This is also the only healer that starts at level 1, so you can start practicing healing from as early as level 15. Next is the Scholar, who opens up at level 30. It comes from the Arcanist and has the unique thing of allowing you to level the Summoner as you go, giving you 2 jobs for 1. The Scholar is a barrier healer with a pet. Different from the White Mage, which is more of a reactionary healer, the Scholar tries to recognize damage before it happens and prepare for it. It can therefore be a little bit more challenging to get the hang of this job, but nonetheless is a very fun one, and you get the most adorable fairy to help you. The Astrologian will open up as you enter Heaven's Ward. This is a buff healer, so while it focuses on healing, you will also have cards you can draw, allowing you to increase the damage output of your party, potentially making fights go faster while you also keep them alive. It can be a bit confusing to figure out the whole card system, and is by some considered the hardest healer job to learn, but one of the more fun ones to play. So giving it a go definitely pays off. And then we have the Sage, which is our newest healer in the game. Like the Scholar, it is a barrier healer, but they mix it up by healing the party by doing damage to the enemy. This job opens up as you reach Endwalker. Follow your ABCs. As a healer, you should follow your ABCs, or in other words, always be casting. If there is no one that needs healing, you do damage. This will make the enemy die faster, causing you to use less mana, makes the dungeon go faster, and reduces the possibility of something going terribly wrong, like you accidentally standing in something that one-shots you. All your abilities can be split into one of 2 groups. There are abilities that are on the global cooldown and those off the global cooldown. You have 2 ways to recognize these abilities. One is that when you cast a spell on the global cooldown, every other spell in that group will have this little white circle that counts down when you can use the next one. Abilities off the global cooldown, on the other hand, will have far longer cooldowns or require another ability to activate them, but they do not affect any other spell. Another thing you need to know is if it's an insta-cast spell or if it has a cast timer. This is especially important for your healing spells. Those spells with cast timer often heal a bit more, but they take longer to be used, while those without a cast timer, often also off the global cooldown, can be used instantly and at times can be mana free. It's really important that you try to use the spells appropriate for the situation. One thing new healers often tend to do is they don't start using the higher level version of the healing spells, because while the higher level healing spell might cost you more, it's also gonna do more healing, which is better gonna match the content you are in currently. And now it's time for us to talk about mana. Learning to manage your mana is key. it's important to keep the mana bar as full as possible at all times, while also using it consistently. Meaning, if your bar is at 100, you probably are not doing anything, but if it's empty, you messed up somewhere, because if you have no mana, you can't heal, which is really bad. Though don't worry, every healer at some points goes out of mana. It's a good learning experience. Thankfully, all healers have different ways to regain mana, and even cast spells for free. This varies between the jobs, so make sure to read up on your healing spells. One of your most powerful weapons against the mana loss is Lucid Dreaming. This ability is part of your role abilities. We will talk about those a little bit later, but Lucid Dreaming will over the course of 21 seconds restore a portion of your mana. This ability can be cast every 60 seconds. Now, you don't have to cast it every 60 seconds. It kinda depends on how much mana you're losing at the moment, but make sure to use this and use it often. And not just on the bosses, but also when dealing with those annoying enemies between the big guys, because they can actually cost you a lot of healing spells. The other thing you do to manage your mana is to read your spells. You see, a lot of your spells, especially the healing ones, have secondary effects. Some grant you mana back, some increase the healing your allies are taking for a while, and some are entirely mana free, and some will unlock other spells with the right use. Make sure you learn your spells and how to use them. This understanding will make you much more confident and a powerful healer. Let's talk about those role actions I mentioned before with the Lucid Dreaming. As I said, Lucid Dreaming is one of your most important spells, but there are 5 other spells with different usefulness that you will get at different levels. First is Repose. This is the first spell you get. This spell puts your target to sleep. It's not always required, but it is a good thing to be aware of. Sometimes you just need an enemy to stop attacking you for a bit. Next is Asuna. You need Asuna. This is very important. A lot of new healers don't know that some damage is optional. And I'm not meaning the standing in the bad stuff optional, but as in you can prevent this damage from happening. At times your team will get debuffs on them that cause damage over time or slow them. A lot of the time this debuff can't be avoided, but it can be dealt with. Some of these will have this white bar at the top. If they have a white bar, it means you can Asuna them away. This damage is optional. So, using Asuna can really reduce the amount of healing you need to do. Do though make note that Asuna removes one of those white top debuffs at a time. With time you're gonna get a feel for when you need to use the Asuna. It's good to Asuna the bad things away so you can spend more time beating up the enemy. Next is Swift Cast. This one allows you to cast any spell instantly. This ability is most commonly used in 2 different situations. The more common one is that you need to resurrect someone. The resurrection spell has a different appearance depending on the job, but it always does the same thing. Over the course of 8 seconds, it's gonna bring one of your friends back to life. But it also has an 8-second cast time. That is really long that you have to stay still and cast. Not to mention if your tank is dead and the enemy is on a rampage, he can kill everybody in 8 seconds. So, what most healers do is they store the Swift Cast for just this moment. The tank dies, you use Swift Cast, and you use your resurrection spell, and the tank will be up in a matter of seconds. The second time I like to use Swift Cast is when you just have unexpected damage. It has to be dealt with quickly, so you need to cast something with a cast bar, but you don't have the time for it, so Swift Cast and then use the spell. Now you're gonna use it instantly, but no, the Swift Cast has a cooldown, so you can only use this once in a while. Sheer Cast, on the other hand, allows you to ignore most effects that either kick you somewhere or drag you somewhere. It is handy in some situations, especially when dealing with bosses that like to throw the players across the arena while you're healing. Keep this one in mind, but it's not something you're gonna use in every fight. And finally, Rescue. This spell can save lives and break friendships. This allows you, as the healer, to target any member of your party and yank them to your side. Super handy if you see somebody desperately trying to run out of the bad stuff, giving them a little rescue and yanking them to safety before they die. It can also be used to troll your friends by yanking them somewhere they don't want to be. Do make note that this has a 120-second cooldown, and you really should not joke around with this spell, except with your friends. But if they are your friends, rescue away. So, now you know your spell, you got those role actions where you want them, and you are ready to heal. But when do you heal? How much healing is the right healing? This is a question pretty much every new healer faces at some point. Figuring out how much and when to heal can be tricky, as you want to balance your healing with your damage output. Be aware that you don't need to keep everyone fully topped off at all times. Try to aim for maybe 80% to begin with. Then, as you become more comfortable, you will start to get a feeling when it's fine to let the tank drop down a little bit lower. If you keep on healing and healing so everyone is always at the top, you're both looting a lot of mana and not really helping the group with fighting. The tanks tend to be sturdier than you think, and as you get to know the content, you start to recognize moments of high incoming damage where you want everybody to be topped up, allowing you to prepare and respond appropriately. This is something that only comes with experience, so remember to tell your group this is your first time in the dungeon, or if you don't quite remember it, or if you're just nervous. Communicating with your tank is the most powerful tool you have. With most of the player base being very nice, you should be just fine. And if they die, well, swift cast and rest. Every healer loses a player from time to time, no matter how experienced they are. Just use it as a learning opportunity. If you mess up, do it better next time, but don't stress over it. And remember, when you start healing, you will probably be bad at it, and that is perfectly fine. Just remember these tips to help you along the way. Know your spells, remember your ABCs, manage your mana, Asuna away the bad, and remember to communicate with your party about being new. And of course, if you haven't already, do the Hall of the Novice. It will take you about 30 minutes and gives you pretty good starting gear for your first dungeon. Now head off to your first dungeon and remember, it won't be perfect, and that's perfectly fine. With time, you're gonna become a great healer. If you found this little guide to be helpful, please do all the good YouTube stuff. And if you want more of my content, subscribe and maybe check out what YouTube is offering on the screen. But for now, I hope you have a lovely day and have a wonderful time healing.